all my hard work and everything I put into him, they just took that with no compassion.
Tonight in Missouri, a community torn following the shooting death of 18-year-old Michael Brown, who authorities say was unarmed when he was shot and killed by a Missouri police officer. Tonight, the FBI involved, in fact, launching an investigation into his death and will determine if the officer violated any civil rights rules. Now, authorities say the teen got into a fight with the cops. Today, crowds marched to the police headquarters following a night of looting and rioting across town. At least 32 people were arrested. Brown's death, of course, comes just weeks after Eric Garner died on Staten Island after being put in an apparent chokehold by a member of the NYPD. Outrage followed. Reverend Al Sharpton, among others, been extremely vocal. In fact, he's demanding justice in the case. Sharpton is planning a march on August 23rd that was set for the Verrazano Bridge. However, the march has now been moved to Staten Island, where the incident took place, and protesters will march to the office of the Staten Island DA, Dan Donovan. Now, Mayor de Blasio, who some say has been playing it a little bit safe on both sides throughout the ordeal, says the protests will have to go on without him. He will not be present. De Blasio saying, quote, "I don't plan on attending that event." And when asked about his relationship with Mr. Sharpton, he told Capital New York, "This is not about what one leader or another leader says. This is not about personality." Now, since Garner's death, many have been highly critical of the broken windows policy. We'll get into that in a second. But, Don, we saw the scene unfold in Missouri, and the kid, it was actually in a really rough neighborhood, was a success story. He was set to start college today as a freshman today, his first day at college. By all accounts here, his offense, at least started, was he was walking in the street. We don't know the details after that. There's certainly two different versions, an eyewitness account and law enforcement. We haven't gotten the medical examiner's report here. We also haven't gotten ballistics as to what happened or didn't happen in the police car where a shot may or may not have been fired. All the other things will come out, but yet I read a really powerful piece. I suggest people check it out too, from LZ Granderson, who's a CNN contributor, and it starts off how he's tired. And he's tired of the same story happening over and over again. Maybe it's a kid on the doorstep at 4 in the morning looking for help in Detroit. Or maybe it's a kid walking home from Florida and a neighborhood watch guy doesn't like the look of him. Or maybe it's somebody who doesn't want to be arrested for selling loose cigarettes on the streets of Staten Island. Or we go on and on and on. And each story is different, but there is this building narrative, and I think people at their own peril underestimate there's a building anger also going on in certain communities. You can see it right now. It came to a boil last night in an ugly and irresponsible way, but yet it came to a boil. Am I right here that this isn't just a Staten Island story or just a Detroit story, or in this particular case, a St. Louis story?
This is definitely a national story. It's nothing that's new. It's been going on my entire life. It will continue after I'm long gone. As an African-American young child, I still remember the lessons at age 5 and 6, being told that I couldn't play with toy guns because a police officer might mistake that toy gun for a real gun and I might end up shot. You learn as a young black boy, don't talk back to the police, don't do anything, because it could end up very tragically. Now, you're right, we don't know what happened in Missouri, but here's what we do know. The one witness is telling a very different story. That witness claims, as of tonight, and Mr. Sharpton will be there tomorrow for a noon event in Missouri, is claiming that they were walking in the middle of the street, the officer said, "Get out the street." Somehow a struggle ensued, and the boy put his hands up, Mr. Brown that was shot. And we know for a fact that he was shot numerous times. We don't know where yet. And we also know that he was unarmed. And we also know at this point, where is the humanity? His body, this would infuriate any community. His body was left on the street like a dead deer or dog for 4 hours. For 4 hours after he was killed. Where is the humanity in that?
You know, part of this comes down to the policing the idea of broken windows, and we've seen the last few days, Tom, that in fact some of the originators of it have spoken up. It was interesting. Of all people, Rudy Giuliani said, you know, you don't have to follow broken windows to the letter of it. You can kind of use it as a policy. It doesn't have to be adhered to the nth degree. But is it time we reassess here community policing? Because it doesn't seem to be community policing everywhere. It's community policing in certain communities.
Well, look, this is a conversation that I think we could probably have for 6 weeks, 24/7 on this show. I mean, this is not a soundbite. These are obviously tragic events, okay? The most important thing that I believe in the Staten Island situation and in Missouri is that we know about them. The ones that disturb me are how many times we've had, whether it's a white cop and a black youth, or vice versa, whatever the case may be, but where we didn't know what happened, and nobody ever bothered to investigate it. And some poor 14-year-old kid was shot and killed, and it just went away like it never happened. We are aware of the situation. Everybody needs to be a little bit more diligent, obviously. Police need to be trained a little bit better. But look, we all have to work a little bit better at this, and we all have to do a better job of, look, there's a reason, and people do not like to hear this, but I think Jesse Jackson many years ago said, look, if I'm walking down the street, this is when New York City was not in a great shape, and 7 black youths were walking down the thing, I'd walk to the other side of the street. I mean, I think we all need to do a better job of doing better within our own community, so that we don't have this fear factor that people like me or Dominic, who grew up in the South Bronx or whatever, I don't have that when I see it. But it's a tragic situation.
The only thing I'll say that's been different, and maybe it's just the confluence of events that happen in a short period of time, is jaywalking, loose cigarettes, a woman that was barbecuing on the front of her house, and then she was in that same situation, thankfully not a fatality. I get the idea, and I'm not trying to be a phony, the whole idea of broken windows and community policing, it makes some sense, but either we're putting cops in an impossible position right now, or what's going on? Right. It always ends, it seems, so much worse than what the actual infraction was to start with. Right. And maybe we've got to change the laws, but to pretend that you can kind of do it and not do it some other times, you're just destined to have a big problem on your hands.
Broken windows is part of the problem, and it needs to be reevaluated, the amount of force the police apply in these cases that are relatively minor. But it's so much more than just broken windows, and you can go through whether it's death penalty cases or whether it's arrest rates for petty things like marijuana possession, cases like the chokehold case here. Is there any question that African American and Hispanic Americans have a different interaction with the police than white Americans do? And the answer is no. Of course there's no question. They wind up being arrested far more often. They wind up being incarcerated far more often. They wind up being the victims of violence and police-related violence far more often. So while we need to examine broken windows and all of these other issues that are popping up, it seems to me that there is a dramatic problem in the way that police in this country seem to handle minority encounters or encounters with minorities.
Obviously, I think it plays out this way, but I read something really interesting. I know we've got to go break, but they went to a really rough area in, I think it was in the Appalachians, whether it was Kentucky or whether it was West Virginia, I'm not sure. Overwhelmingly white, but there was a big problem as it related to crack or meth or whatever that was going on there. And they went there. They didn't go to a nice area, and they were there, and it was nothing to them. And I think that leads to so much of this, where nobody wants both sides look at the other side as the enemy.
Richard,
and then it all manifests itself.
I would love to see New York City in particular, and bigger police forces. I would love to see more minority police officers. I really think that, when you have a city like New York, more minority police officers, not police officers who are from Long Island or Westchester, who I think that would...
They talked about it, Tom, the idea of making a residency requirement. Do you think that's fair?
No, look, I do think it's fair. I know the unions would hate it. et cetera. But I do think that it would help solve the problem. I think that if you're an African-American kid who grew up in Brooklyn, you could be a damn good police officer and have a better understanding of your community and the participants in your community.
Also, there's an enormous gender disparity in the New York City Police Department and police departments across the country where women are underrepresented as police officers in the country, and that would have a huge impact.
Richard, I really tried. I tried to run out the clock, and I really tried I tried to let it go tonight. But the bottom line is, you can call it broken windows, you can call it Richard French Live, and it's going to piss off Tom and whoever else. The fact of the matter is, police, white, black, whatever color, they don't respect minority communities. That's the problem. And so I agree with Mr. Doherty that if you had cops, a police officer from Long Island who grew up not exposed to many people of color, and he's now confronting a 16-year-old homeboy with his hat to the side, his jeans hanging halfway off his backside, and a baggy jacket, is scared to death to encounter that youngster. I might even be a little scared, but I know how to deal with him a little better than the average person.
And maybe that same community, Dominic, and I understand what you're saying, but maybe that same community should do a little bit better job of raising that kid so he's not wearing his pants around his ankles, et cetera, et cetera.
Guess what, Tom?
Because look, I think that...
Guess what? You are 1,000% correct.
Right, and that's my point, is that we all need to, whether you're white, black, you just need to assimilate into what society wants.
I'll take you a step further, Tom. Black youngsters have to stop committing crime. Or we have to deal with the perception that it's us committing crime.
Right,
Although
exactly. I agree.
This is a good kid. Richard, it could have been my son.
Right.
It does not matter.
Right.
It could have been Tiger Woods.
It's
It does
terrible.
not matter. It doesn't matter. All they see is a black face. All they see is an angry black man. Somebody run his record. Let's see how many arrests he has. Let's lock him up and get overtime tonight. That's the way it's perceived in communities of color. As far all we are is overtime for police officers.
That's wrong.
But it's true.
No, I'm just saying it's wrong. No, I agree with you. It's just wrong, though. That's not the way we should be doing things.
As Tom said, we could be doing this thing around the clock, but when we come back, I want to bring this table in on the Moreland mess here. Is Governor Cuomo going to get out of this thing unscathed here? The poll numbers say yes, but there may be more to this story between now and November. We'll talk about that after this.